Okay, this is English 101, Week 12, Part 11. Um, so we're pretty much done with Walker at this point. Now, I'm not going to talk about Walker anymore, but you have an essay that you're going to do about Walker again around in the middle of the middle of May, some like a May 17th kind of area. I'll let you know exactly when it's going to be on the announcements. And check back on Blackboard regularly and email me if you're worried about it, but I'll figure it out. So I'm done with Walker. So if you've got questions about Walker, if there's anything you need to know about Walker, you got to ask on the discussion board. There is not an upcoming lecture where I might answer your questions. You're going to have to bring up any issues you got with Walker. You got to bring them up on the discussion board. Something you could do on the discussion board that will help you prepare for your essays. This is something that maybe is not clear to students. The whole point of the discussion boards prepare you for your essays. I discovered a lot of students don't want to do discussion boards, but they do want to do essays, and then the essays are all wrong. If they had tried out any of their ideas on the discussion board, I could have corrected them and they could have gotten credit. But they didn't do that. They just went, they decided the first time that I should hear from them is when it was a grade worth a large percent, when it was an important grade and not a discussion board grade, which are easy. Because in discussion board, you just get credit for trying. Anyway, the point of the discussion board is to kind of help you with your essays. So one thing you could do on the discussion board this week is talk about what scares you. And then also talk about which one of the things that scares you do you think you should really be worried about? But then which of the things that scares you are like the kind of thing that's stupid that you should not be scared about? Because you've heard all my examples. But like, I think it's worth thinking about. That's something you could discuss, because the thing is, if you do that on the discussion board, maybe you can use those same examples when it comes time to write paper 4. I don't know what questions you're going to get asked on paper 4, but I think having some fears ready to go, since you know that one of the essays is about fear, that means you're probably going to be talking about fear somewhere in paper 4. And every time you quote, you need examples. So maybe if you think of some fears, some of them that are rational and that you should listen to, like starvation, and some of them that are irrational that you should ignore, like cannibals, if you do that in the discussion board, then you can use that stuff on paper 4, because you can't plagiarize from yourself. Okay, cool. This is good. Yeah, so talk about that in the discussion board, and also questions, whatever you want to do with but you can try putting things in your own words and giving examples and reasons and how much do you agree or disagree with Walker. Okay, so that's that. The other thing we need to do before we kind of end this week is this thing called the talking points. Now I put the talking points up that's in the Unit 4 folder. What are the talking points? The talking points is really simple. So there is a committee in the English department in which a bunch of professors sit on a committee and they decide what readings should be used for the English 101 final exam. So they picked Walker and Smith, and now everybody who is in an English 101 class has to end the semester by writing this essay in which they will quote Walker and Smith. The other thing that committee does is that they design the questions. Remember I said you'd get 3 questions? How many are you going to pick? 1. How many are you going to quote both Smith and Walker? Yes. Are you just going to quote one of them? No, don't quote one of them, only quote both of them. So they come up with the questions. After they come up with the questions, they do this thing called the talking points. Now, the talking points are basically things they think you should pay attention to in the essays. Why do they think you should pay attention to them? Because they're probably going to be related to the questions they're going to ask. So they have a list of talking points. Now, the talking points that they've listed are for both Smith and Walker. So if you look at these real quick, they might not immediately make sense to you because you don't know the Smith at all. But I'll tell you really quick, the Walker piece that we just finished was all about fear. And the Smith piece that we're going to look at next week is all about joy. And so this is obviously going to be a thing about emotions. So let's take a look at the talking points are things you should understand, because they're going to help you with the questions you're going to be asked. There's not a lot of talking points, and they're pretty simple. Let's take a look at them. So the first one is joy/fear, connections between the two. Well, I'm not going to go into that now because we haven't read the essay about joy. But one of the essays is about fear, the one you just read, the Walker piece. And the Smith thing is about joy. So when you're reading the Smith, Just think about links between the two of them. There are connections. There must be connections between the two essays, or they wouldn't have put them together and asked you to quote both of them in the same essay. Because if you're writing an essay, you have one main point. Well, they want you to quote these two, Smith and Walker, while you're making your main point. So Walker and Smith must be related to each other, because you wouldn't want to quote two random things in your essay. I think it's easy to see what the connection are. It's about emotions. You're going to be writing about emotions. Joy and fear are the main ones you're going to be writing about. So let's take a look. And that actually, boy, does that work really well for our semester, because I have you writing about love. I had you do a whole semester on love, and I feel like that really prepared everybody really well for a thing about joy and fear. So think about connections between joy and fear, since the two essays are about joy and fear, but we'll get to the joy essay next week. The next thing they want you to think about is controlling or reframing one's feelings. Well, we already talked about that. Walker's point is that you have fear. Instead of ignoring it or dismissing it or saying it's childish, maybe you should reframe it. Reframing means, because usually you frame fear as, this is stupid, fear is dumb, don't ever be fearful, fear is for children. Maybe you should reframe it as, maybe fear is useful, maybe fear is, that's reframing. You're reframing it. You're saying, you know what, fear, maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe it's actually useful and I should think about it more. So, and then once you think about it, then you can control it and be like, actually, cars are more dangerous than airplanes, or actually, doing laundry and buying groceries is the best way to protect my family, not buying a gun. The talking points say that you should think about imagination and stories. Well, Walker spent a lot of time talking about imagination and stories. So that seems like a pretty easy thing to do. But imagination and stories is a big, because Walker's whole point is that fear is a type of the imagination, and that fear and storytelling are actually the same thing, because you come up with you're imagining things in both cases. You're imagining what's going to happen to the characters in the story you're writing, but you're also imagining what's going to happen to you in your fears. And of course, both the stories, fictional stories, and your fears are not real. They're just things in your imagination. The other thing they want you to think about is emotional intelligence. This is an interesting idea. Usually we use the word intelligence. When you say somebody's really intelligent, we often mean their brains are good. They're good at math. They're good at science. They can discover things. They can do puzzles. They can do Sudoku. They can do, I don't know, fucking whatever, accounting. And it's like, when we say someone's intelligent, they can see 5 steps ahead and they're really good at chess or whatever. So we usually say intelligence to mean like brain power. But there's this other thing. There are multiple types of intelligence, and one type of intelligence that we don't talk about it as much as emotional intelligence. So being really good with your brain and being able to solve puzzles and riddles and memorize things and do math problems, that's a type of intelligence. It's a kind of brain intelligence. But there's also an emotional intelligence, which is being able to think about your feelings, to have feelings and to think about them. And to figure out which ones are important and which ones are not important, and which ones should you pay attention to and which ones should you ignore, to kind of think through them. So if you feel angry, if you have emotional intelligence, it might be like, if you have a bad emotional intelligence, if you have low emotional intelligence, when you feel angry, you might just punch the wall or punch a person. But if you have good emotional intelligence, you might be like, oh, I'm so angry. What is making me so angry? I'm going to think about my feelings for a minute, because I'm mad at you and what you just said. But actually, what you just said reminded me of my mother. And I'm actually really mad at my mom. And I'm not really mad at you, so I'm not going to punch you or anything. I need to tell my mom that she really hurt my feelings. That's emotional intelligence. We often don't talk about that. We ignore that. So there are different kinds of intelligence. And so emotional intelligence is being able to pay attention and think about your feelings. Lots of people may be very brain intelligent, meaning they can solve puzzles and do math, but they have very bad emotional intelligence, meaning that they don't know what to do with their feelings. Maybe they're angry and they punch people as soon as they have a temper and they get mad, or they get, or they're sad and they don't know why. So these people have low emotional intelligence. So the point is that there's intelligence isn't just the brain. It also involves emotions in the heart and the ability to think clearly about your emotions. Okay, I'll pick up the last talking points in the last video. Cool, this is going really well.